All right, guys, we're on lesson 10.5, decimals and fractions. So our key concept today is that decimals and fractions can show equivalent amounts. What are equivalent amounts? They are the same amount. Okay, you can write that down. Decimals and fractions can show equivalent amounts. So we're going to start with an example, and our decimal is 7/10. Okay, and we're going to make a model. I'm sorry. So 7/10 in decimal notation, 7/10 in fraction notation. Draw your model, make your rectangle, and divide it into 10 equal parts. Okay, we're going to shade 7 parts. And now you are going to draw 70 hundredths. You've got 7/10, and I can also write it in decimal notation as 70 hundredths. When you color it in, you're going to see that we are coloring in the same amount. Sorry about Milo. Okay, so we have 7/10, 70 hundredths. They are equivalent. It's the same amount colored in. The fraction notation is 7/10. The decimal notation is 7/10. 70 hundredths, decimal notation 70 hundredths. And then the word form is 7/10. And 70 hundredths. It doesn't matter what you call it. They are the same. Okay. Let's go to our next one. And we're going to work with 1/10. So example, and it says fraction. It can also be written 10 hundredths. And as a decimal, it can be written 1/10 or 1 or 10 hundredths. They are all equal. One-tenth can be written with a denominator of 100, but we have it's like multiplying it by 10. We have another 0. It can be written as 1/10 in decimal notation or 10 hundredths. And in word form, we've got 1/10 or 10 hundredths. Okay, you're going to have a couple of problems to work out that are going to look like this. I've got 30 hundredths, 3/10ths, 30 hundredths. Don't forget your THS. We've got 3 hundredths. And we've got 3 hundredths. Got 3/10ths. All right. So the way this works is we're going to circle equivalent ways to represent 30 hundredths. If you divide by 10, you're going to get 3/10ths. So we have 3/10ths is equivalent. 30 hundredths is the word form for 30 hundredths here, so that's equivalent. 3 hundredths would only be to color 3 out of 100, and that is not 30 hundredths, so that is not equivalent. 3 hundredths would be related to 3 hundredths, so we got decimal notation and fraction notation. And then we have 3/10ths. So 3/10ths and 30 hundredths are all equivalent fractions. And the directions to that portion of the work on page 659 would be circle the equivalent fractions. All right, so there we are. Decimals and fractions are equivalent. They can be written in tenths, they can be written in hundredths, and they mean the same amount. Decimal notation, fractional notation, and word form. Example number 1, we had 1/10, and it's the same as 10 hundredths. If we draw the model, we would have proof that 1/10 equals 10 hundredths. There's the decimal notation for 1/10, decimal notation for 10 hundredths, and the word form. And if you have to circle the equivalent fractions to the very first one, you see which ones are equivalent to 30 hundredths. These would not be 30 hundredths. This is only 3 hundredths. All done.